My name is Danielle McLean. Lots of familiar faces here, and it's good to see you all. And we were just talking about 3 years ago, I don't think hydrogen was mentioned once at these conventions, and now I think only one presentation didn't mention hydrogen. So that's super exciting. And a little bit about me. So the way this panel will work is I'll give you a quick overview of me, panelists, and then we'll just jump into a Q&A. And you all can jump in and ask questions at any time. Just raise your hands and somebody will bring you a mic, though we can't really see you, so raise it big and make movement so we can see you. It'll be informal, fun conversation and lots of engagement, so please don't be shy. So a little bit about High Sky Society. We started my first company, we were a for-profit hydrogen eVTOL company. And we were looking at, what are things that we can do that can really extend the range of these vehicles. My co-founder of that company, Dr. Rachel Laux, is an MD. And so her passion is obviously saving lives. Mine is saving the planet. And putting those minds together, thinking, okay, how can we save the most lives with aviation without destroying the planet? And it turns out that a lot of those flights that save lives are around 300 miles. If you think about going to rural areas, you think about organ deliveries, transplants, sometimes you have to get search and rescue, emergency search and rescue. Those flights tend to be way longer than 100 miles. And so while we love the idea of flying over traffic, that wasn't really where we were passionate. What we were passionate about is saving the lives of the most people with aviation without trashing the planet. And so we started looking at companies that were doing exactly that. And of course, it didn't take us long to learn about Dr. Martine Rothblatt and United Therapeutics and some of the amazing things that they're doing with EHang, who's already flown hundreds, at least dozens, maybe hundreds of passenger flights with organ manufacturing and mass delivering. And so that we fell in love with that idea. And seeing what Mikkel and some of the team at United Therapeutics and Beta are all doing is just really exciting. So we started thinking, is there a way that hydrogen can do these longer flights? And what we learned is, yes, there is. We looked at all different kinds of fuels. And so why hydrogen? Why now? Well, it turns out, and we're gonna talk about the elephant in the room, okay? And you guys are gonna participate in this. Hydrogen did not cause the Hindenburg to blow up. Everyone together. Hydrogen did not cause the Hindenburg to blow up. All right, if you take one thing away from this, that's the takeaway. But it turns out hydrogen is really safe to use. And as a lot of us know who've taken Dr. Wong's class, it's got really high specific energy. The volumetric density isn't exactly where we want it, but that's a conversation for another day, but we're working on that. Hydrogen's been used safely in other industries for years. If you look at the forklift industry, there's already infrastructure, they use it. And I wouldn't say that hydrogen is safer than any other gas that we use day to day, but it's certainly as safe. Different properties make it safer. And so there are a lot of reasons why it can be used today. And like I said, it's been effectively used in other industries. The challenge is not a lot of them are in aviation. And so that's exactly why High Sky Society exists. We started in 2020 with Vertical Flight Society as the H2 eVTOL Council. And there were a handful of us that participated in Agility Prime in 2020 that were looking at hydrogen out of the hundreds of companies. And we all had different ideas and visions on how to bring hydrogen to fruition. Some people thought gas, some people thought liquid. I've heard of solid state. I've seen all different types of aircraft configurations. And so we all kind of bonded together and started this little group called the H2 eVTOL Council, where we meet on the third Mondays of every month. A year later, we had over 100 participants. 2 years later, we had over 300 participants. And 6 months ago, we had over 400, and I think we're over 1,000 now. And we got so much traction. There was so much technology. These webinars are invaluable. You just won't believe how far this technology is compared to what we traditionally think about in aviation. And so we decided, this is a really successful group. It needs to spin off into its own project. So Mike and I got together and we said, okay, High Sky Society needs to, have its wings and take off and do its own thing. And so that's what High Sky Society is. We were very grateful to Mike Hirschberg and Vertical Flight Society for providing us that platform to really launch this technology. And if we look at, Europe and other places, they're a lot further along than the US. And there wasn't an organization here that was specifically focused on advancing hydrogen in aviation. So we have our big event in June. It is called Flying High. We'll have over 1,000 participants, over 100 presentations, and we bring together all the pieces of the ecosystem that I like to call, and I'm sorry, Drea, I'm gonna say buckets because I'm an engineer and we like the word buckets for some reason. If somebody knows a better word, please tell me, because I've been saying buckets. But there's 6 buckets essentially that need to come together to make this happen. And of course, the big one in the middle is the aircraft. And as you learn in Dr. Wong's class, you look at your mission profile that's gonna tell you, how big, how heavy, how far, how fast, how often. And then that's gonna size your fuel cell. That's gonna tell you how much hydrogen you need, which is gonna, inform the refueling station how much hydrogen they need, how much hydrogen needs to be transported, produced, et cetera. So it all needs to really be focused around that mission profile. And that's what High Sky Society is we bring that ecosystem together to focus on the aircraft and bring hydrogen aviation to fruition. So mark the date, June 21st through June 23rd is Flying High. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our amazing panelists today, and this will just be an informal conversation. Like I said, you all can ask questions. I'll start out with some questions, but if you have any, just raise your hand and we'll bring you a mic. So cool. All right, Elizabeth Collins is a researcher and engineer by training on the hydrogen production, power, and storage team at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Elizabeth's work primarily focuses on teleeconomic analysis, data analysis, and modeling of hydrogen and end-use systems. Specifically, her projects look at medium and heavy-duty fuel cell vehicles and fueling stations, airport infrastructure, combined heat and power systems, among others. In addition to analysis and modeling work, she performs hardware testing on light-duty hydrogen vehicle refueling nozzles. Elizabeth received an engineering degree from Columbia University in 2021. So please give a warm welcome to Elizabeth. Welcome. John Piasecki received a bachelor's degree in political science with distinction from Yale University. In 1989, he joined Piasecki Aircraft as executive assistant to the president and was responsible for proposal development, contract negotiation, and administration. In 1991, Mr. Piasecki's responsibilities were expanded to include oversight of all business development and financial aspects of the company, as well as purchasing, human resources, strategic planning, public and government relations. In 2008, he assumed the role of president and CEO with responsibility for leading the overall management of the company. Mr. Piasecki serves on the board of the Vertical Lift Consortium, is a member of the American Helicopter Museum Executive Advisory Board, is a trustee of Foreign Policy Research Institute, and former public policy chair of the Philadelphia chapter of the American Institute of AIAA. Mr. Piasecki is an FAA licensed fixed-wing pilot and a member of the Vertical Flight Society, National Defense Industry Association, Yale Alumni Schools Committee, the Hayford School Advisory Board, and a former director of the Opera Company of Philadelphia. Please welcome Mr. John Piasecki. Dr. Alex Ivanenko is General Manager, Rotorcraft and New Segments at ZeroAvia. He's the ex-co-founder and CEO of HighPoint, who I might also add that I believe John and Alex have both been part of H2E VTOL since day one, the council that we started, if I remember correctly. Alex and then Elizabeth joined us, I think, about a year ago. Alex held senior roles at both 3M Corp and Owners Corning. In 2019, he founded HighPoint, the NASA award-winning Silicon Valley startup pioneering air-cooled hydrogen HT-PEM fuel cell. And I'll let Alex tell us what that acronym stands for. I do know, but I'm not going to say it. Fuel Cell Systems for Aviation and Urban Air Mobility. He attended Saratov State Technical University, where he received his bachelor's and master's degrees, both in engineering, as well as a PhD in electrochemistry. Please welcome Dr. Alex Ivanenko. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here and our amazing panelists. And I will start off with a three-part question, and I encourage anybody from the audience to chime in as well. So I mentioned earlier that Europe was a lot further along with hydrogen aviation than we are here in the US. How do you view the landscape for hydrogen and aviation in North America right now? Is the US going in the right direction with the incentives of the Inflation Reduction Act, and I'll also say like with Build Back Better and the other one, the Jobs Act? What needs to be done? Anybody could go.
I can.
Yeah.
I can start if you don't mind. First of all, thank you very much, organizers.
Is he on?
Can you hear me? No? Can you hear me? Okay. So once again, thank you very much that you're having me today at the panel. I really appreciate it. And first of all, to answer on your questions, so when we incorporated our company in the United States, so we face a situation that there is no enough support from government to for hydrogen aviation. As you said, that's 3 years ago, no one mentioned hydrogen in aviation. It was like Alex said, I received a lot of messages from my investors and partners. Alex, what are you doing? So hydrogen aviation is unbelievable, right? But in the United Kingdom, for instance, it was a completely different approach. So they have a special council, Hydrogen Aviation Council, the decarbonization of the aviation, and et cetera, et cetera. So that is why you can see that a lot of startups and a lot of companies move to United Kingdom to incorporate their company there. And a lot of insignificant support those companies can receive from UK government. ATI, Aerospace Technology Institute in the United Kingdom, they have several programs to support different aspects of hydrogen aviation development, not only focusing on hydrogen fuel cells, but also on infrastructure topic, on electric motors, and et cetera, et cetera. So that is why 2 years ago, I said everyone, hey, UK is the capital of hydrogen aviation. But now what I see, and that's you're absolutely right again, Daniel, that's only few presentations did mention hydrogen in their pitches, right, today in this conference. So that is why I see a lot of interest in the United States to hydrogen aviation, and at the same time we see a lot of governmental programs appeared last few years to support such activities. So that is why I think that United States is still a bit behind, but the situation significantly improved. That is what I see in the market right now.
Cool, thanks. Did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, well, I think that, is this working? Can you guys hear me? I think there was a fundamental shift in terms of policy with the administration and the legislation you were talking about, the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, or the misnamed legislation. Both of those have a major thrust towards a hydrogen-based economy. And I think that the approach that's being taken within the administration is to focus on establishing an ecosystem through hydrogen hubs. Right now, there's about $8 billion identified for at least 4. DOE is talking about maybe as many as 8 that will be geographically distributed around the United States that will be loci of production, distribution, and consuming activities. They're basically trying to keep develop self-sustaining ecosystems, and then one of the key evaluation criteria for candidate proposals in these areas is that they have the opportunity to grow. So in essence, they're laying the seed work for transition of the U.S. economy from a fossil fuel-based economy to a hydrogen economy. Now, aviation isn't the focus of a lot of that, but aviation can play an important role. VFS played a very important role in organizing the H2 Aero white paper. I really appreciate Mike's leadership in organizing that group. And they've come out with a white paper that is essentially a aggregation of the key elements, a roadmap, if you will, for implementing hydrogen into the aviation ecosystem. And my experience in talking to the people at DOE headquarters anyway, has been that aviation is sort of seen as not enough scale to be a primary focus. And they quite rightly look at, like heavy trucks as a primary application for hydrogen, at least initially. And what I'm trying to convince people within the administration is that while aviation may not have the scale of some of those heavy-duty applications, it is a lot more, it has a cost structure that's a lot less sensitive to the early stage pricing of hydrogen, green hydrogen, which is going to be expensive initially until we can get the economies of scale. And so hopefully we'll be successful in gaining support for that. And I think that there's a lot of focus on, when you look to the FAA, on SAF, which is great, and that's a very practical way of getting low-hanging fruit in terms of reduce carbon footprint. But ultimately, hydrogen has a lot more promise to reduce completely the hydrogen, the carbon footprint. So I think we're moving in the right direction legislatively. Yes, Europe had some early lead, but I think there's at least at the administration level, a major shift towards supporting hydrogen. Now, I'm hoping that that's going to lead to more support in the technology area, in the standards development area, and the infrastructure planning and support.
Elizabeth, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, I guess from a national lab standpoint, I can't necessarily comment on the policy aspect of it, but I can echo what you're saying about the heavy-duty vehicle being, I guess you could call it like a step towards aviation. I think the national labs are focusing a lot of their energy and funds towards heavy-duty vehicle, fuel cell vehicle research, and I think that the aviation is the natural next step for the national labs research, and I can say that we have already started doing some research with the FAA and other private companies to, I guess, start the hydrogen aviation sector off a little bit from the national labs point of view. So yeah, I can't really comment on the policy, but I do think that there's a lot of excitement coming from industry and the Department of Energy and the aviation space, hydrogen aviation space. Yeah, looking forward more to it.
And by the way, if you don't mind, I would like to add that in the United Kingdom, they created like an ecosystem for technology development in hydrogen, as I said earlier. But the first commercial adopters actually based in the United States, Alaska Airlines, United Airlines, so all those companies had agreements with ZeroAvia, and we have pre-orders from them to replace standard turbines in fixed-wing planes to hydrogen version, to hydrogen power plants. So
That's
there is perhaps it's a different ecosystems, but we can see the first commercial adopters in the United States.
Yeah, and we're certainly so much further than we were. And kind of like you said, John, we see an emphasis on hydrogen and hydrogen hubs and aviation, but we haven't seen hydrogen and aviation together yet, but I think we will. And I think the infrastructure is going to be the way to get to that. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. And technology. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of promise. A lot of the technologies that we're looking at in terms of reducing weight and improving energy density and specific power, we have very high bars that we're trying to meet, and we're graduating it from the lab to test stands, and then we'll be flying a vertical flight aircraft this year with a prototype cell. But you start a long journey with your first step, right? So there's a lot of work to do, and I think the government's got an important role to play in supporting that technology maturation.
That's great. That I'm going to skip around a little bit here, but that actually leads into a great question. What role do companies like Piasecki and ZeroAvia and others play to get things moving?
Well, I mean, I think we have the responsibility of proving the efficacy of the technology, and you know, it takes small, innovative, you know, organizations to be able to have the agility to encounter the unexpected, or somebody used the term unplanned, unscheduled test events, and also the cultural willingness to fail and get back up and reattack the problem. So we're very excited about our partnership with ZeroAvia. We've come a long way, but we've got a much further to go. Ultimately, adoption of the technology is going to be established through practical, objective demonstration of capability, and we're not going to do it all at once. It's going to be stair-stepping. But listen, everybody's from Missouri until you fly. So.
Yep.
Yeah, and I just would like to say that not only ZeroAvia and Piasecki, commercial companies who is involved in that industry, a lot of companies right now, a lot of efforts from different companies to move that. And I think that commercial companies like Piasecki, HighPoint, ZeroAvia, my previous hat. Yeah, okay, ZeroAvia. Of course, so we understand what market wants. So because we're speaking with other commercial companies, airliners, and users of different types of hydrogen technologies. And of course, so we can lead the changes of that ecosystem, right? And this is our role. And of course, so but this is a industry revolution, I would say. So that is why we have to think about working groups, like in Vertical Fly Society, we have that. But I think we have only one, but we have to create more. So because to diversify our negotiation and conversation inside, because H2A right now is about everything, right? But I think the most important thing is that we commercial companies can create like a very, very special working groups, for example, about only infrastructure, about, let's say, about electric motors, propellers, and et cetera, et cetera. So, and I think this is the most important thing, where, again, we can discuss and create ideas and share with authorities, which at the same time they can see that, okay, market is ready to adopt the technology. That's great. They discussed and have a solution. Okay, we're ready to support, simplify rules, simplify policies, and et cetera, et cetera. That, I think, our roles of commercial companies to change that ecosystem.
That's great. What are your thoughts on that, Elizabeth?
Well, I think, I agree with what you both said. I think it's important as well to emphasize the concerted effort between industry, especially in the hydrogen space, since there's very little infrastructure already in place and standards and codes. To encourage, concerted effort between industry partners to kind of push hydrogen aviation forward, because I think, there's, a lot of need for that to happen.
When you look at the motivating factor for hydrogen, it's not just reducing carbon footprint. The promise of, at least in the hydrogen fuel cell application, the promise for reduced operating cost is significant. All of the key factors that support that potential benefit need to be validated. And our launch customers, are not going to make the commitments until they see objective data to support those claims. So,
yeah, that's a good point. And, you're exactly right. It is really going to bring down the cost, because hydrogen is the most abundant molecule in the universe. But the challenge is it doesn't exist by itself, so you have to get it usually from water. But you can do that with 100% renewable versus, lithium. You have to mine the lithium. It's not exactly a sustainable process. But if we can get to where we can affordably make hydrogen with renewables, then we can significantly drive down the price. And that brings me to the DOE and the hydrogen shot. And I don't think I have this on there, but I just thought of it. I was wondering, could you comment on what the hydrogen shot is and how that might, I don't know, play out for aviation?
Sure. So I'm assuming it's targeted towards me.
Yes, I was looking at you.
So the hydrogen shot, I think it's something like 111, and they're hoping to get the hydrogen production cost to $1 per kilogram in the next 10 years. So I think by 2030 at this point. And so that's a goal that the Department of Energy has released, and through funding, through these hydrogen hubs and the other initiatives that the Department of Energy has put through, we're hoping to, or I shouldn't say we, I'm not the Department of Energy, but the Department of Energy is hoping to decrease the cost. And I think there's a lot of hope that we'll reach that point, and I see a lot of promise towards getting towards there. And the research that we're doing at the labs are helping get to that point, and industry as well. And I think scaling up hydrogen in the next couple of years will be really important towards lowering that cost of hydrogen. And yeah, I think as far as aviation, I think, having other industries such as heavy-duty vehicles and light-duty vehicles expand will only help the cost of hydrogen decrease for aviation and essentially lower the cost in total for the aviation industry. But yeah.
So hydrogen is a widely used industrial gas, and the vast majority of it is produced through methane gas reformation, and it's pretty affordable, actually. The problem with that process is it has a huge carbon footprint. There's a whole bunch of technologies being developed for carbon capture during that process. The industry's sort of adopted a color-coded approach. I think they're moving away from that, and in the legislation, I think there are actually standards promulgated that define quote-unquote clean hydrogen that permit the use of some of these heavier carbon footprint processes, provided that they have carbon capture. So I don't, the electrolysis is one area certainly that needs to be looked at, and they've got incentives to do that, but we need to be looking across the board, and there's such an industrial infrastructure there right now producing hydrogen. If we can reduce that carbon footprint, I think we've got a multiple paths to the 111 objectives that DOE has established.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the color system, because I'm kind of curious in the audience, do you all know about like green, gray, blue hydrogen? I'm seeing a lot of heads nod. And I think there's like turquoise now, and there's even brown, but yeah, you're absolutely right, John. We do need to be looking at all of those different ways. Of course, I'm a fan of green hydrogen, so I kind of made that obvious when I was talking about electrolysis, but there are other ways to make hydrogen that is still better than, the traditional way that we make it, which does have a heavy carbon footprint. Alex, what are your thoughts on that?
So definitely in the infrastructure, in generation hydrogen, producing hydrogen is the most important thing if we're talking about adoption of hydrogen technologies in aviation and the zero area. We have like a team who developed right now, who are developing the hydrogen generation technologies. And by the way, in our facility in Campbell in the United Kingdom, so we not purchasing hydrogen at all, we generate it. So, and our concept in Zero Area that we will produce hydrogen on site during standard electrolysis process using green energy, right? So, and of course, so the aim 1111, I think is achievable. Especially if we will integrate in that, in that calculation, carbon credits, which we can, carbon certificates, right? So, and that's, I think, may support $1 per kilogram. But again, it depends on where is the location of the airport, because as I said in our team, right now we're investigating different use cases and commercial cases, because zero area, wants to provide a solution for our customers as like an all-included. So you just need to pay, you don't need to care about how to obtain hydrogen. So you just need to pay for hourly rate to use our hydrogen power plant. That's it. So this is this headache belongs to us. We will provide you everything you want, and like in the lease scheme as usual. So this is what we do in ZeroAvia, and just kind of reminded one of the investor in ZeroAvia, and we know a lot about infrastructure, is Shell, who's a manufacturer of hydrogen. Actually, is the number one in the world. As John mentioned, that is a very, very convenient gas. You can buy it everywhere. It looks like, oh, hydrogen is something I can meet. Actually not. So it's produced only in the United States. It produced about 100 million tons a day, if I remember, a day or I forgot. So it's a huge amount of hydrogen produces every day. Yeah.
That's really cool. I wonder, can we learn from automotive and, seeing like what happened with the refueling stations in California, where I think if I remember, you have a Toyota
Yeah.
Mirai, and you can't really drive outside of California. Right
That's
now.
true. So that's true. This is one of the limitation to penetrate that technology. And again, infrastructure is a problem, right? So, you can travel outside of California. That's absolutely true. But we can see that program again is a Infrastructure Act, right? So in the United States, they also cover some that aspect. So building pipelines, hydrogen hubs, and expand hydrogen refilling station network across the United States. So that is what will happen. But there's a different question about Toyota Mirai, it will survive or not. But for aviation, so of course it's very, very adaptable technology for airports, because actually airports has a lot of approvals to use different dangerous materials, gases in their area. So that is why we don't see that it should be a big issue to install additional tanks or hydrogen electrolyzers in airports on site. Yeah.
Yeah, and with many airports already use hydrogen in forklifts, so it's not like they don't have the hydrogen, there already. I'm glad that you.
And by the way, this is a good comment, because Forklift is a company who led that technology with Plug Power, right? So when they right now moving to infrastructure company, right? So rather than just a fuel cell company. So they are going to build hydrogen hubs everywhere. So this is one of their part of their strategy to be in the market, and what they're going to do next several years.
Yeah, that's exciting. So what I wonder is, are we going to, industry seems to sort of be trending towards SAF. And then at the same time, we have, these hubs being built, which sounds like it's really going to solve the infrastructure at the beginning, rather than waiting for a situation like, we've got all the refueling stations in California and people can't leave. We spread these hubs out all over the US, and we can fly anywhere. But then as we're building out these hubs, we have airports getting ready for SAF. What does that look like? And should we be talking, I'll start with you, Elizabeth, should the airports and the hubs be talking more? Are they, or can you comment on that?
Well, I guess, I think SAF, yeah, I think hydrogen plays a role in aviation. I think in SAF does as well. It's national labs. We're looking at all of the different propulsion types. We're not going to rule out one. And so I think what's been seen is that SAF can be implemented now, and there are companies like ZeroAvia who have shown that hydrogen technology can be used in planes. But SAF can be used now, and that's where a lot of airports are looking towards. But I think as the infrastructure, for hydrogen infrastructure increases at the airports and for in these hubs, hydrogen utilization at airports will increase also. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that, John?
Well, SAF is a very practical way of getting the carbon footprint for aviation down. I think it needs to be supported. The main promise that hydrogen brings to the table in the vertical lift sector is that it's the opportunity to be able to electrify rotorcraft and remove the primary cost of operations in rotorcraft, which is the turbine engine. And you can run a turbine engine on SAF and reduce your carbon footprint, but it's not going to make that engine less expensive. You have to get away from the complexity, the maintenance costs, et cetera, of turbine engines. So I think SAF is a great idea, and I think SAF should be used in turbine helicopters as soon as we can establish its safety and promulgate it. But the promise of electric VTOL is to expand the application of vertical flight across a much broader set of use cases by bringing the cost down. And so the promise of hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cells, which have very few moving parts, is to do that, but still provide for competitive performance. And so I know that the eVTOL community that is focused on batteries has built business case around urban environments, and that's great. But when we look to our customers in the helicopter industry, for instance, EMS operators and what have you, their mission profiles are 200 nautical miles plus reserves. And so batteries just, they're not going to cut it. So they have improved a lot, but when you look at the potential, a lot of those improvements are going to be flattening out. Now, new chemistries might come along, and that's great. But from the work that we've done, hydrogen offers the best opportunity for those longer range missions that existing paying operators, need to be able to do.
Yeah, that's good. And I'll just add to that, if you think about, let's say you want to build, a home that's 100% renewable, you're not going to sit there and say, should I use solar panels or wind turbines? You're going to use, your geothermal, your wind, your solar, you're going to use all of it. And that's what I like to think about when I think about eVTOL, especially with hydrogen. The batteries do play a role. So I don't really like to think about it, and I don't think you were saying this, I'm just adding this in, but instead of it's not batteries versus hydrogen fuel cells, it's batteries and hydrogen fuel cells, although Alex might disagree with me. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. But I think, the ideal performance is, you have your battery for lift, then you have, hydrogen for cruise, and then battery for landing.
No, it depends on, today at lunch we have interesting conversation, and I don't want to say that lithium batteries shouldn't be integrated. Yeah, of course, yes, because it depends on the mission you have, right? So if you have only just a few flights a day, so like a short term, 5 minutes, lithium batteries will be more than enough. But if you are talking about some flights, but you need to fly 100 nautical miles, right? So, and et cetera. So you must use another power source. So I think that both several power sources we have on the market have their own niche on that market. So specifically, again, based on specific missions you would like to execute with this eVTOL or any aircraft.
Cool.
And John, I just would like to say, if you said that in fuel cell, you have only few moving parts. If you see that, it seems that something unscrewed, and you have to fix that as soon as possible, because there is no moving parts in fuel cell at all. So.
They have a few fans, but I get your point. Economics, sustainable economics is what's going to make eVTOL and hydrogen VTOL penetrate the market. And so carbon footprint is important, but if you don't have the economics, it's not going to be adopted.
Can you talk about, Elizabeth, what projects or experiments that NREL is working on? I think we had talked about a facility you all were building, and what's the status? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
No, I don't know which one you're talking about.
When I saw it, it was a 3D render, so I don't know if maybe it hasn't done anything yet.
Is this a heavy duty? Is this aviation?
Yes.
Oh, heavy duty.
Heavy duty,
Okay,
yeah,
I see.
yep.
Yeah, so I guess we have several projects, I guess, somewhat related to aviation and some related to aviation specifically. I can't go into too much detail about them. I think the one that you're referring to is the heavy-duty vehicle simulator that we have at our lab that's fully built. We've been testing it. I think most recently we tested, I think it was 80 kilogram fueling of hydrogen into our heavy-duty vehicle simulator, which some could say could be used in a small aircraft, small airplanes, could be transferred into that space. So at NREL, we are working heavily in the heavy-duty vehicle space and have the capabilities to do that sort of testing. We are looking into doing liquid fueling testing. We don't have that capability yet, but there's been a lot of interest from industry to start looking into that space. So if you're interested in learning more about the heavy-duty vehicle space, hydrogen heavy-duty vehicle space, I'm more than happy to talk about it more. But that's one area we're looking in. And as I mentioned before, we're also working with the FAA to do a technical infrastructure report analysis for them, looking at airports and fueling demand for aviation, and working with industry partners to collect data to kind of see what the expected fuel demand is for that, so we can start designing airports and get some of these codes and standards as well moving along, and just have a roadmap, I guess, for a lot of the airports that want to transition to hydrogen aviation.
That's exciting. When is that supposed to be, is that already in work, and when is that expected to be published?
So I guess there's two parts to that study. We have an electric or battery VTOL part of that study, and the publication for that will be released this summer. The hydrogen portion of that we're still working on, and the paper will probably be released at the end of this year, maybe next year. We're working on that right now. So if you're an industry partner who works in hydrogen aviation and you want to give us your data, come speak to me. We're looking to collect data for that project.
That leads to my next question. Well, I was going to say, what do you need from industry? That's definitely something that we would like to help with and support as much as we can.
Sure. So yeah, data collection is one part that we're really looking to help with. Specifically flight data and hydrogen demand, energy demand for the airplanes or aircraft themselves. We're looking to be like a data repository so that we can kind of generate models for aviation, unexpected fuel demand and infrastructure at airports. We already have a lot of heavy-duty vehicle, light-duty vehicle infrastructure models, and we're hoping to build out that capability as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll be looking for that this summer and the end of the year. Mm-hmm. If there was one thing, John, I'll ask you first. If there's one thing that government does to help hydrogen aviation in the U.S., what would it be if you had to pick one thing? One thing.
Well, the most important thing for us and our community is to understand what the rules are for the road towards certification. And there's a whole learning process that's got to happen with hydrogen. And we're looking forward to working with the FAA. We are working with the FAA. They're frankly leaning forward in that process. And so over the next 3 years or so, we'll be doing development work that will inform those certification criteria. And the community, I mean, I'm talking about the SAEs and the standard societies, have a lot of work to do in order to establish consensus-based standards that we can refer to as an industry to get the technology safely developed and fielded. And so the government's got the ultimate responsibility for doing that. So that's the number one thing.
That's great. And speaking of SAE, they're here and they have 3 working groups specifically on hydrogen aviation already. So those things are being worked on. I just wanted to give a little shout out to SAE because they've done a lot of really cool work and they've presented at our group a couple of times. Alex, one thing, what would it be?
So my personal experience, right? So, I mean, when we incorporated High Point 3 years ago, we received a lot of data because it's an innovative hydrogen fuel cell based on high temperature membrane, new system architecture. So we did a lot of our internal tests in the lab. So when we presented our customers, they say, Dani, so you know, this is your internal lab test, and etc. We would like to get more validation. So what we did, we went to NREL, by the way, and they did for us special program. So where we are tested our approaches and ideas, and what we receive in NREL in our lab, major dollar. But everything is good. So it's provide a lot of credibility to our company. The NREL report, our report is the same. See. But we were a startup, and when we signed agreement with NREL, it was significant money we spent on that. And for startup, you know, each dollar, especially in the beginning, is very, very important. So perhaps I think for hydrogen innovations, companies, startups, and community ecosystem, I would say, if government can create some like a tax return program or something, R&D supported or something like that, that will be really valuable, especially for innovations in hydrogen innovation. So because I see a lot of companies in Silicon Valley who are trying to do something in electric motor, in hydrogen fuel cell, in hydrogen storage, and et cetera, but we need really support from government to get easier, the access to that fund should be easier, or tax return, something like that. That will be helpful, to my mind.
I couldn't agree more. Go ahead.
I do have to give a shout out to AFWorks. They have been huge help in our development efforts, and I expect that role to play, to be expanding. The Department of Defense does have a mandate to look for ways of reducing its carbon footprint. The challenge is as good as hydrogen has the potential to be, in energy density, you know, some of the missions that are required for the Department of Defense are so energy intense that it's not going to be addressed with anything but a turbine or jet capability. But there are a large and I think significant group of missions that could be, and so could be addressed by electric propulsion, hydrogen electric propulsion. So AFWorks has, and also AFWorks has this mission of also looking at how can they support the commercial development of technologies in the aerospace sector. And so I think hydrogen is going to be an important example of what that potential is. And I think Agility Prime is going to be speaking tomorrow or what have you. And I just want to express our appreciation to them. The work that they've done is also an opportunity for creating a locus across the departments. I'm thinking a working group for the U.S. government that provides for interagency dialogue, education, awareness. In this case, certainly NREL and DOE and the FAA, and I think NASA has a role to play as well.
Probably big.
Along with DOD.
Great. Okay, just checking. I have a timer down there. It's hard to see.
You've got 9 minutes and 13 seconds left.
So I have not been looking to see if anybody's raised their hand, so I apologize if anybody did, but let's take a couple of questions from the audience. We've got about 10 more minutes, a little less than 10 more minutes. We've got somebody over here. Who's got the mic? Here it comes.
Excuse this real novice question, but new to hydrogen and aviation. What's the compelling use case for hydrogen versus batteries? I know you mentioned range as one, but when we consider like energy density and storage space in an end-to-end electrical power system, what are some of the trade-offs between batteries versus a hydrogen-based electrical system?
You want me to take that?
Yeah. So once again, as I said earlier, it depends on the mission, right? So For instance, at Zero we initially started focus on retrofit aircrafts, standard fixed-wing aircrafts and airlines, like a 2-A, 228, which was last week we did the first flight. And retrofit business model, actually you just replace existing aircrafts with hydrogen version. So it means that market already exists. The same stuff right now we're doing with John when we design a helicopter. He designed a helicopter and we provide our powertrain to that, not powertrain, that's just a fuel cell for that helicopters. And again, John is addressing to existing market segments. So, and where we understand that you have to fly longer and et cetera, et cetera. And when you consider existing missions, so you will understand that lithium batteries, will be complicated to find a solution with lithium batteries to replace existing aircrafts. But for new market segments like air taxis and etc., so of course you have a lot of place and rooms to use the lithium batteries and such aircraft like eVTOLs in air taxis, business models and etc. John, would you like to add something?
Well, I can tell you what Alex said to me when he sold me on the idea of hydrogen fuel cells. And
No, it wasn't me. It was Luigi first.
okay, the metrics that
Yeah.
that caught our attention is the potential for five times the energy density of lithium-ion batteries. Threefold increase in specific power, reduction in operating costs relative to the turbine engine by as much as 50%, and zero carbon footprint. I think there's other benefits too, including the reduction in acoustic signature, and those attributes are pretty compelling. You do mention some important challenges. Volumetric density is a big issue for hydrogen. Fuel cells, they generate power based on their surface area, so they take up space. So when you design a vehicle, or when you apply hydrogen fuel cells, you almost have to design the aircraft around it. That's a big air vehicle integration challenge. We're pretty excited about it because we've.
But it's not fundamental limitation, right, John? So it's just a question.
No, it's just, it's a question, it's a question of design challenge.
Yeah.
Challenges are opportunities.
And when John says 5 times energy density, he means specific energy. The volumetric energy, as he mentioned, is still low, but we're working on that. But it does have 5 times specific. So for those of us that have taken Dr. Wong's class, hydrogen's right now about here, and we want it to be up here, if you know what chart I'm talking about. I know you all do, because we use it all the time, but, so it does still have, it takes up a lot of space, and that's the big drawback, but there are things that we can do about that, but it does carry much more energy, 5 times more energy per kilogram than fossil fuels. So
One of the biggest questions that we have to address in this H2 Aero white paper that the VFS sponsored, addresses a lot of the practical infrastructure issues with hydrogen. But in terms of vehicle integration, the decision to go gaseous versus liquid hydrogen is a big choice. For the larger vehicles, I think, particularly in the fixed wing area, liquid hydrogen is going to be pretty important. There is a dividing line where gaseous becomes an option. It's in the smaller gross weights. The challenge for us is our primary application is right on the dividing line, so we're going to have to make a decision. But that's going to be not just a technical decision, that's going to be an economic decision based on the required infrastructure, et cetera.
that makes sense. I think we had one over here.
Compared with the fuel system. In a fuel tank, we have regulation 25.981.8.3, which is ignition prevention. This is nightmare. It's very, very difficult to accomplish because there is a requirement for validation and also for verification, test and test. The question I have now for hydrogen, do you think the requirement for design and installation will be as rigid as also as stringent as for the fuel tank for comparison? That's all my question. If I have to compare, I have designing fuel system for the engine, right? You have a fuel system because it's not only tank. They are associated with tank, with plumbing, with the motor, with the coupling devices, right? With the valve, so many, many things we have to concern to be safe, to showing safe. But now with the hydrogen, I want to compare it just to think that will it be very complex? Something
Complex?
that I want to avoid it very, very complex.
Is-
That's all
is
I
it-
want to know.
Sorry, having grown up in aviation, my hearing's been severely damaged, so I didn't get everything you asked, but I think the general question was the complexity of not just the fuel cell, but the overall balance of the plant and its integration with the aircraft. Is that? Yeah. So. Yeah, so in the helicopter world, we have Part 27, Part 29. We're going to have to develop standards for implementation of the hydrogen fuel cell, and that'll be applicable to both those. But a lot of the challenge in the design is not just volumetric, it's thermal management.
Actually, yes.
What's that?
Actually, yes, I think it's one of the most important questions.
Yeah, it's particularly the technology that we're working with Zero Avia on is a high temperature PEM fuel cell, which is air cooled, or well, it's not. I wouldn't say cooled; it's air managed, and so that's a high throughput of a lot of volume of air going through the aircraft to manage the temperature of the reaction cycle in this fuel cell. So there's a lot of integration challenges or opportunities, and there's also synergies between the air vehicle design and the implementation of the fuel cell that can improve weight and improve performance.
And one of the benefits for fuel cell specifically, right? So you can't do that. The system usually modular, so you can distribute. You can create a special package and distribute components of the system in the aircraft. When you design the aircraft like a classic gas turbine, you have to package very, very complex in the one place. In comparison with fuel cell, as I said earlier, you can distribute it in the aircraft. Yeah, but the main challenge is actually heat distribution and this stuff. Yeah, correct.
Another big benefit of the fuel cell that we see is redundancy and graceful degradation. If anybody's been in an airplane when the engine shuts off, it gets very quiet. And in the fuel cell, you can lose a portion of the system, and the balance of the system will continue to operate. So it has a graceful degradation.
I think that is our time. So thank you, Alex, John, and Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Make sure and join us in June.